Good afternoon, everyone. You're now tuned into A Reasonable Conversation on Nusound Radio 92 FM. I'm Prerna and I'll be with you till 1 p.m. Hope everyone enjoyed last week's show where I was joined with Paul Uppal MP. We had lots of text messages and phone calls, and as always, we'll try and get through as many of them today too. Today, I'm joined in the studio with Vivek Sharma. Hi, Vivek. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. So much happy that the weather's better now.
I know, it's great, isn't it? We're also joined by another very special guest, Mayuri Parmar. Mayuri is the director of the Conservative Friends of India. Hi, Mayuri. Thank you very much for coming to the studio today.
Hi, Prerna. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem.
All right, we're going to be talking about youth in politics, as Prerna said. And if anyone would like to speak with us on there, the studio number is 0208 472 9292. And if you want to text in, you can text in on 07961 387 787. You can also tweet us at nusound92fm.
So it's a very important topic. I mean, all three of us are youth ourselves. And there is lots of, youth disengagement with politics these days. I mean, what's your opinion, Mayuri, as Conservative Friends of India director? Do you feel that the youth aren't very engaged with politics? Or is there an increase in youth engagement?
I mean, I think it's probably, the picture's more complex. So, in terms of statistics, you sort of have, I think something like 43% of 70 to 18-year-olds, 70 to 19-year-olds were registered to vote.
Well, that's a really low figure.
Which is really, really low. And actually only 44% actually turned out at the last general election. But then, in terms of the work I do, I come across individuals that are really, really engaged, but perhaps not with a formal process. So they're engaged in their communities, they do fantastic work, with youth projects. But, actually, in terms of the formal system, there'll be things like, they're all the same, or, they don't understand us. And so I think, actually, there's probably a lot of latent political engagement that just needs to be tapped into. And that's something that I think schools need to do more work on. And there's probably, some space for us, in the political arena to do more as well, to engage. So
you think there is interest out there and it's just a matter of tapping into it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think earlier we were discussing Jermaine Jackman, and for those who don't watch The Voice, he was the winner of The Voice 2014, dubbed the sort of singing politician. He's a teenager, but always said, actually, I'd like to be the first black prime minister. And I looked to him, and I think many people would say, God, well, he's a bit of an anomaly. There's not many people like that.
No, especially a singer,
Exactly.
He's so young.
Yeah, he's young, but, understands, very involved in Hackney in his area, happens to be a Labour Party activist as well. And so, what was it that's different about his experience compared to other people's? And I think probably, actually, it sounds as if, the politicians in Hackney and actually the opportunities in Hackney for young people to get involved are great. And that's perhaps something that, should be emulated elsewhere, in my opinion. So
by that, do you mean like the parties who are established in Hackney have got a good foundation, good infrastructure to engage with youngsters, and you think that's what's the key missing factor?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the factors, certainly, and I think every single party out there can do more to actually have, and rather than it being sort of tokenistic, actually having a serious conversation and an open conversation about issues that matter to young people. And I don't think that I was looking at some of the campaigns that are out there at the moment, and there's an organisation called Bite the Ballot, which is basically doing lots of work with voter registration in particular. I think between the last election and the general election next year, there's going to be, I think, 3.5 million new potential voters.
Oh, fantastic.
And so what they did was I think it was February the 5th, they did a campaign to get people to register to vote. And it was great, and they managed to get, I think, 35,000 extra people to vote.
That's really good.
And the way they did it was through they're not non-party political, but what they did was they kind of went to celebrities and tried to get them involved and actually educate people about why it's important to have your say, and why actually engaging formally is one of the ways to do it. And I think one of the exercises, you can look at it on YouTube, is that there's they put to say a classroom of people a question. So, for example, we spent £9 billion on the Olympics. Do you think that was well spent? Everyone's got either a badge or a sticker, and they gave everyone a badge or a sticker according to the voter registration percentages. So 60%, had a sticker, 40% had a badge. So then they were asked to have, they say, people that agreed went to the right, people that disagreed went to the left. And then at the end of it, they had this debate, and at the end they said, well, everyone that's got a sticker your say doesn't count because
Oh,
you
wow.
didn't register to vote. And I think things like that is a really simple exercise, but really great way of saying, actually the formal process is an important one. And actually, if you're not going to be, engaged with the formal process, you can't expect politicians to sort of respond.
Yeah, because if you don't vote
Yeah.
and you're not involved in the process, why should they take your opinion seriously? And then actually, if you don't vote, your opinion doesn't actually really count because you're not going there and you're not choosing your leaders who represent you. And I think it's a really good idea getting celebrities involved, because the youth, I think, do look to celebrities a lot more than, say, politicians or other people out there.
Do you think that's a part of the problem? We're too busy watching The Voice and things like that,
Yeah, I
rather
think
than
it's
to watch
true.
news.
I mean,
listen
no
to Radio
one,
4.
people my age don't tend to watch the news. I mean, if I sit there and have a debate with people about politics, they're like, Prerna, what the hell are you talking about? We don't care. Did you see EastEnders last night or something else? So,
Yeah.
And I think that's, I'd say I'm probably a little bit, of an anomaly in the sense that I don't know many people that are necessarily sort of interested in politics and then want to then pursue a career in it, apart from the people that are around me in politics, which is quite, there's not that many, which kind of saddens me, because I do think that people have great things to. I mean, we talked about the riots earlier, and was that a symptom? There's lots of studies on why this has happened, why this occurred. Was that a symptom of people frustrated, wanted to have a say, but actually not being able to, not being involved properly, which is why actually was it acting out? I mean, I don't quite have an opinion on it completely, but. It's a question for I think policymakers out there and politicians.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, I think a lot of youngsters nowadays, well, maybe they don't, but I mean, in my opinion, the people who I've been speaking to, it seems, either you're interested in politics, and the
Or you're
people are
not.
very actively interested, and, maybe you want a career in politics, or you're kind of not.
no, that's true.
And there doesn't seem to be an in-between. And I'd imagine there is. Would you say there is a lot of opportunities to get involved without wanting to be a career politician or, be a spat or something like that?
Absolutely, I think there are, and I think this is a case of just not enough information is disseminated about this stuff. So, whether it's getting involved. So I know, for example, my younger sister, when we were, it was just, we saw this kind of note on a notice board, and I think it was at school, or I can't remember where we saw it, or a youth club, and it was to get involved with the UK Youth Parliament. And I don't know if anyone's heard of the UK Youth Parliament, but it's a way to become a member. Each local authority has a youth assembly, and you get elected onto that youth assembly by your fellow peers. And you kind of stand election, and anyone between the age of I think it's 11 to 18 can stand.
So would you have like a national youth prime minister?
I think I'm not sure how they do it, but I know they elect people, and then there's a national body, and they actually
That's
campaign.
interesting.
Yeah,
So then it gives people a taste of,
what it's all
politics
about.
is like.
Absolutely. And also, and not just, so other ways you can get involved is just generally, acting in civic life. So, you can become a justice for peace. You can sit on your school governor's board. You can get involved with local democracy. I mean, we've got the elections coming up on May the 22nd.
Yeah, it's very soon.
And, I think actually, I've been talking about voter registration. You've got till May the 6th to register.
Oh, that's good. So all of
And-
you listeners out there who
Yeah.
haven't registered, please do register.
And the
better
way
get
you
going.
register, you can go to www.aboutmyvote, and you can and register to vote by May the 6th. And I think it would be a great way to have your say locally, because people don't understand how much the local council does for you and how involved they are locally in your lives.
Yeah.
That's true. And going on to what you were saying earlier, that yourself in politics, there's not a lot of younger people around you. And I think that's a problem as well, because when younger people look at politicians or people involved in politics, if they just see lots of older people, they're not going to want to be involved in it, because they think it's not for me. It's too distant from them. Especially local associations as well. They're dominated by older people, and younger people might feel intimidated by that too.
Do you think? I mean, I think that's a really good point. Do you think, in the political parties and in the general political infrastructure, age is like although it's not explicitly mentioned, you need to show seniority of some sort to be taken seriously?
No? I don't think I'd be doing my job if that was
No, sure, yeah, no,
so I don't think so. I think it's about, if you're interested,
Yeah.
and you're enthusiastic, then there is always space to get involved. I mean, I think you know, an example of it myself, I think I'd say Prerna, you know, if you want to get involved, I think there are ways to get involved, and I think there's people that are actively encouraging it. The issue is kind of, I think, you know, as you said, demystifying some of this sort of
it's a perception.
The perception around, you know, it being, you know, not having the confidence to maybe approach your local MP, or thinking, you know, anyone can go into the House of Parliament and have a tour. All you have to do is write to your MP, and they're obliged to take you for a tour, for example.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So all of you out there that want to go, you know, to visit the House of Parliament, you can do. You just have to write to your MP. So actually, there's some of these things that, you know, I think people are afraid to kind of approach it, because they think it's you know, something that's unattainable, or something that, you know, is not for them. And
it's quite stuffy, full of posh people. I mean, lots of people say that to me as well. They're like, why are you involved in politics? You know, we're Indians, blah, 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 you know.
Yeah,
there's all this kind of stuff. And that actually follows from this text message we've just got from Rakesh. She said, most Indians will not go into politics as there is no money, which is a very interesting point of view. Thank you very much for your text, Rakesh.
Should there be more money in politics? There seems to be enough issues as it is.
The
money
like
that's already in politics at the moment. Yeah.
I think, you know, it's about it's about people's personal motivation in terms of getting involved. But I think most people get involved for the right reasons. You know, they want to better society and help people. I think in terms of the text message from Rakesh, it's interesting because obviously I part of my job is to engage with British Indians in terms of politics, and you do hear that a lot. I mean, a lot of my peers as well, they're all, you know, incredibly successful, went to red brick universities, but they're kind of were never encouraged to sort of get involved in it's not the sort of done thing. You kind of become a banker or a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, and because it kind of sets you up for life, you know. And I'd say, I don't know about you guys, but you know, my dad's always like, the first and foremost, you set yourself up and then you help people. And that sort of I think attitude obviously has served us incredibly well as a community, because, you know, in terms of how we're doing, but I think actually there are so many transferable skills. You know, if you're in any of these professions, in terms of what you can bring to politics, it's incredible. And some of it's kind of the soft skills, but even the professional side of things, in terms of being able to understand people and understand policy areas. I mean, there's so much that people could contribute, and I'd really encourage it.
I mean, that's why people who are young don't get involved in politics so much, because they are too busy setting themselves up, making money, and then they go back into politics at a very later stage. So we're kind of missing a big gap, because people think, well, you know what, there's no money in politics at the moment, let me set myself up, have a good career, and then when I have time and, you know, I'm getting close to retirement, then I can start, you know, being involved in politics and campaigning. Yeah,
having thought about it a bit, you know, when you put it like that, it kind of makes you think that maybe it's not such a bad thing. It might be good to actually go out there and get some commercial experience, see what's actually
out there,
you know, get a job, earn a living. You might be able to, you know, make different and perhaps better informed policies as a result. Maybe it's a bad idea to become a career politician right from the start. You know, it's because I think that's one of the other perceptions, isn't it, these days, that politicians don't, well, some politicians, you know, especially near the top end, don't have actually an idea of what real life is like, what life is like for the average man. And so, you know, giving the power to decide to them isn't really, a lot of people don't feel comfortable with it. I'd say that's definitely a big reason.
Yeah, and I think that's true. I mean, I guess there's two routes into politics. You know, you can sort of go to university, study one of the humanities, and then become, you know, a parliamentary researcher, and then become a special advisor, and then, you know, work with the party, and then, you know, that's one of the ways of doing it, I guess. But, you know, most people, and if you look at especially the 2010 intake of MPs, I mean, a lot of these were very successful lawyers and businessmen and community workers, and, you know, they actually had or served for a very long time, you know, on local councils before they'd even thought about entering Parliament. And I think it makes, for me, my personal opinion is that it makes the sort of lawmaking process and the decision-making process so much more informed if you have a better idea. I mean, if you yourself basically gone out and earned money and paid bills and paid a mortgage, and, you know, that's always it means you can understand what people are going through. So I do relate to what I do personally think that's I'm not saying that it's either way is right, but I personally think that it makes the process better.
No, definitely, because people want to elect people that can relate to them, not just someone who's, you know, gone to like a really good university, just flown straight into Parliament and worked their way up and have, you know, been around the kind of bubble all their lives. They haven't actually lived in the real world and seen what it's like out there. So yeah, no, it is important. We've had another text message in from Rita who said, if politics was corrupt and you could make lots of money, people would flock to join. But I don't think it's good to have a corrupt system.
I was going to say, what do you mean if?
Oh yeah,
No
controversial. No, it's true. I think people need to have faith in the system and the political system. And at the moment, there's so much, you know, going on with scandals. We need to cleanse ourselves from it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I think, you know, I think there's another side to it as well. And I'd be interested to get your view on this as well. I think, you know, it's up to the people. The people make the system at the end of the day, really.
Yeah.
And so it's really, if you get a good batch of people coming in, the system will clean itself, I reckon. It's just a matter of finding the good batch and getting them attracted to it, you know.
And the thing is, they did want to increase MPs' wages, but I think the public weren't up in arms about it, so they've stopped doing that now. I think they're reconsidering.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to my point about motivation. You know, I don't think really that politics has ever been enough of a sort of career in the same way that any of the other professions are. You know, and I don't think it's not about earning money. It is about, you know, it's about helping society. It's about, you know, helping people. And I know that certainly the people I've come across are there to do their civic duty. It is a public service.
Yeah. And
there are, you know, individuals over the past, you know, 4 or 5 years, and essentially, you know, with the media sort of scandals that have happened. And, you know, it's basically totally, I think, ruined the image of a lot of members of Parliament that work really, really hard. And, you know, this is where I will defend MPs now, because I don't think enough people do. I mean, you know, these people work 11, 12, 13-hour days. They, you know, and you talk about perks and this, that and the other, but they don't, you know, they have to basically, they're either in Westminster making laws or they're in the constituency helping their constituents. And people will go, well, that's their job. Well, yeah, fine. But, you know, they do get paid less in terms of the hours they do than most other people.
And it's really difficult. I mean, I spoke to Paul Uppel last week on nusound, and he was saying he's got to, you know, spend so much time away from his family, his young children. It is quite difficult. People don't understand the amount of effort MPs put into their work.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe we don't often get to see the reasons why people join. Maybe if there was some way of, I don't know, MPs being a bit more obvious about that, because, you know, from the point of view of the public, right, you just see the media, you just see the headlines, you know, and you look at the way the game, you know, the politics game is played on TV, you know, Prime Minister's question times. You know, for most people, they look at that and they think, oh, this is ridiculous. You know, this is my future that's being decided. And these people are kind of turning it into a game of, you know, whose researchers can twist which facts to suit their argument better. Sure,
but what's interesting, and this is what the media won't talk about because it's not a good story, is that, you know, behind the scenes of PMQs, these people are working together to make laws, and actually most of the time there is a lot of consensus, and, you know, it's quite people, you know, even if they have ideological differences, they will work together for the best thing that they believe, you know, the best to better the country. But PMQs is a bit of a, you know, this whole kind of idea of Punch and Judy politics. But I love it, you know, I love that kind of, it's an institution, it's part of our democracy.
Yeah, it's tradition, it's entertaining, it's always been there.
I think that it's important that we can see there are, you know, for everyone saying, oh, well, the parties are exactly the same, it's nice to see that actually, you know, maybe there are some differences, although arguably a lot of people say now that actually the system of PMQs is, you know, it's not, that there are kind of pre-written answers.
They are,
and, you know, people know what the questions are and all the rest of it. And
it's all staged. It's kind of like you've got a stage drama. But you've got to remember that's only half an hour or 1 hour out of a whole week of work.
Yeah. So. But it's interesting as well, because you said Punch and Judy politics, right? And you can't help but get that sense that there's this game going on. But if you look at other countries, right, you know, some countries really do have Punch and Judy politics. You know, I've seen
chairs
incidents in India. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's real entertainment, I think. You know, I mean, if we're going to do it, why not go the whole hog, MPs? If you're
they
listening.
Slap each other as well in some other countries. I've seen it as well.
I think the Parliament channels viewings would go up, wouldn't they?
Oh, they really would. Yeah, people would definitely engage more.
We've had another text message in from Sushil. He said, pleasing everyone and towing the party line is not everyone's cup of tea. And you yourself can't be in politics if you're always watching your back. I think that's something, I know some people find that makes them deterred from going into politics, because if they do go into politics, they're always going to have to toe the party line. They can't say what they want to say. If they do say something which is a bit controversial, the media will pick up on it straight away. It'll be all over the papers, and their career will be ruined in minutes. So what's the point of going through it all?
Yeah, I've often got this sense from a few friends who've kind of been toying with the idea of being involved in politics, that to get anywhere, you need to buy into a party, you need to support a party, climb up the structure of a party, and by the time you get to a point where you can do anything really, your views have already become the party
Watered
views,
down,
or they've changed to such a point. Would you say that's fair? Do you think there's enough representation of individual views within each party, or does everything kind of get homogenized into, the Conservative view and the Labour view? I mean, that's I know that's an extreme position I'm taking, but
it can
what
happen.
what extent do you think? Yeah, because obviously, the whips, they have a job.
I mean, but that job is to pass laws, to make sure that we've got a given amount of time that Parliament sits for, and there's a certain amount that they need to pass a particular number of laws in a particular period of time, and that's just about making sure that it can happen. But I think that I think that you can have a spectrum of views in any given political party, and even if that means that often people say that UKIP is an offshoot of sort of a faction of the Conservative Party. Well, actually we live in a democracy, and actually if that's happening, then that's showing that our democracy is alive and it's real, and that's good. Do I think that because by joining a party you water down your own individual views? I mean, I think my personal experience has been that I've learnt more about what I believe in as a result of joining a party, and actually saying, and I'd say all I'd say is people should get involved. So whatever colour you are, get involved. And what I mean party colour, I mean by that.
Okay.
Sorry, get involved, because I think that actually it's more important that you understand the system, because there's a lot to learn, I think.
But also, just quickly adding on to the whip point, if you do want to be a minister in any kind of political party, you have to vote as the party votes, which is interesting. So if you want to vote, if you feel really strongly against something, you have to vote.
Well, you
have to resign as your position.
But then again, I mean, there are times when the whips are, called into action actively, right? And then there's other times, though, where you do see instances of, a certain politician within a party saying something a bit more controversial, which doesn't belong to the party view. But I think those are quite rare. I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean, if it's an important issue, for example, going to war, and you're against the party and you vote against the party, you have to resign if you have a minister position.
But I suppose the point is, if everyone's saying their own thing, how do you kind of decide? We could make this more like reality TV. You could have a phone-in sort of thing where everyone has their say, and then the public can call in and vote for people.
Speaking of calling in, do keep your views coming in. The text line is 07961 387 787. You can also speak to us on the studio. It's 0208 472 9292. And if you're a youth out there and you're not interested in politics, do tell us why. What can we do to get you more involved?
Afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to a reasonable conversation on Nusound Radio 92 FM. We're joined today by Mayuri, the Director of Conservative Friends of India, and we're talking about youth politics. We've had a really interesting discussion so far. We were talking about before how youngsters don't seem to be quite involved in politics, and how different ways of getting them engaged, there's different ways of getting them engaged, both through party infrastructure, maybe through the community. But you were saying education seems to be key, right?
Absolutely. The reason why I got interested in politics personally, we had citizenship, and I don't even know if they still do citizenship lessons in school.
Well, yeah, I remember those.
But there was an opportunity for 2 people from each class to go to the House of Parliament and debate the death penalty.
Oh, okay.
And I was on the side for the death penalty, which is against my personal view. And I know when I was there, it really made me think about how amazing the place was. I was 14, first time in the House of Parliament. It's fantastic. So it was really my school that gave me the opportunity to do that, and that's how we got interested. And also, we had one teacher, and she inspired, I think, a couple of classes actually to get into politics, to study it, that's kind of how I got involved. Actually, when you speak to other people, or who are in the same sort of boat, and in politics now, they'll probably say the same thing. I had a great teacher, or I learnt about it young. And so I think that's education is absolutely key. But then also I think there's a role to play for like not just schools but parents and communities, massively, because I think if you can't encourage even just simply things like at home, I used to have dinner table conversations about politics and the news, and my dad used to sort of argue with us for the sake of arguing, but it kind of piqued our interest.
No, definitely. I mean, my granddad, he's really interested in politics, and I've grown up listening to his stories and listening to his views and opinions, and it really has an impact on you because you want to do something about it or help make a change.
But apart from your parents already having an interest in politics, which seems to be the case in both your cases, right? How would other parents who just aren't, I mean, not everyone and not every parent knows a lot about politics, right? It's apart from the interest, there doesn't seem to be many reasons, particularly in the Asian community, why an Asian parent might talk to their kids about politics. It doesn't seem to be anything they're interested or bothered about. If anything, it seems to almost be contrary to the life plan they have mapped out for their kids.
Well, I think if it's to do with their native countries, and all of a sudden everyone does get really interested, and discussions become, quite animated and lively. So I don't know. It depends. I mean, we've got a caller. Our caller's back on air. Hello.
Hello. Sorry about that.
It's okay. What's your name and where are you calling from?
My name is Ali. I'm calling from Ilford, so I'm local as well.
Oh, hi Ali. Thanks for joining us on New Sound Radio.
Thank you very much. I've just been listening to your discussion, and I just think, just to add some points there. I think not being a politician is a way of life, and the way it's portrayed and the way it's seen is somewhat as boring, and not a lot of youths would want to get involved in that kind of aspect with so much activities and things that you can do in this day and age. I'm coming from an Asian background. My parents didn't push me to become a politician or to voice my opinion. In fact, they did the opposite. You go to uni, you study, you become a doctor, and that's it.
Yeah, no, that's really true.
I think that's true for a lot of Asians, wouldn't you say, Ali? I mean, I've got loads of friends who will probably say the same thing.
Yeah, of course. Come from an Asian background. My parents. I did like politics at one time in my life when I was young, and I was going through. I think I was in year 9 or 10. I was on the student council, and just making a difference. I wanted to voice my opinion.
Oh, fantastic!
I got sucked into where my parents were like, "Okay, you know what? We don't want you to do that no more. It's none of your concern, to be honest. What happens in the world? You just go to uni and you study."
So why do you think that is, Ali? Is it the money issue? Is it because politics doesn't seem to be a good career in our community? Why do you think your parents didn't want you to go into politics?
Well, I think that's because of two things. I think one is money, because they don't see a future in it. Like as an Asian guy, you need to support your family. You need to make your parents happy. Your parents don't want to go to someone else's house and say, "Oh, my son's a politician," and the other one says, "My son's a doctor." There's a little battle. And I think that's the main thing, is it's the way of life. They didn't see it's a future.
Yeah, I mean, going back to your earlier point that you said that it comes across boring, I mean, how do you think politicians can make what they do more interesting and, engage younger people?
I think what they should do is interact more with the communities, in the sense that there's a lot of activities, a lot of youth clubs that are open, and maybe if they show a side of them having fun, maybe once in a while if the politicians show that they're having fun in life, then it wouldn't seem such, a boring thing to do.
I think that's actually a really good idea, because I think, when the average person looks at a politician, you can't actually see them being like a normal person, having like normal hobbies, having jokes time generally.
And this is what I was saying earlier about sort of demystifying this idea of politicians being, on a different plane, or the career being unattainable, because it's not the case. They are human beings. They have families, and they're just doing a job like everyone else. It just so happens that it's in the media glare. I mean, Ali, do you think a lot of it is because of the way the media portrays politicians, or is it?
Well, yeah, you could say that, because, like you said, it's just a job for them. But for example, if there's someone who's a banker, you'll see the banker Friday night in a pub, having a drink, he's having a good time after he's done his job. But when it comes to politicians, you don't see what they do outside their job. You just see them standing on a podium with a suit and tie. And as the media plays, like, that looks like that's the only job they're doing. Yeah. They don't do nothing else.
But I think that's a really good point you make there, Ali, because I think the media also works in a different way as well with politicians. Nowadays with the newspapers the way they are, if you're a politician, you've got to be really careful what you say, regardless of whether it's, during your hours on job or just, with friends. You've got to be really careful.
Because if you do go out partying... So go on, Ali.
As a politician, you get seen more in the media than a celebrity does.
Yeah.
And everything you do or say, or anything wrong that you do is gonna affect you. It's gonna affect your role. It's gonna affect what you're gonna do next.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's why they have to be, seen as to be really boring and not have a life or have fun, because if they do go out drinking and go mad, then it's going to be all over the papers.
Maybe there is something to the boring thing, though. I mean, I've often seen people sleeping in the House of Lords. It's during debates. It
happens.
Like, just because I do have a friend that's a politician as well. Like, she's trying to get involved in everything, and when I do say to her, let's go out and stuff, it's always the boring stuff, the museum. The museum, the park, I'm like, no, let's go for, no, let's go to the science museum today.
You know what? Maybe that's a good point, Ali. I was going to say we need to get some more fun, interesting people into politics as well. Yeah, like Jermaine.
Yeah, like Jermaine Jackman. Do you think some people and even if you think about Obama over in America, he's got people like Jay-Z and Beyonce kind of campaigning for him. Do you think that things like that would actually make a difference, getting younger people involved?
That will work. That will work because obviously these people are in the celebrity eye. They're fun. They wear good clothing. They're always looking top. And they have a lot of youth and a lot of adults that will follow them. So that's a smart thing to do.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing your views with us.
I think I'm going to run next year.
I think you should,
do. That'd be great.
Yeah, and whoever Ali's friend is, can you please get some more interesting hobbies?
Yeah, please. You're giving the rest of us a bad name.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Ali, for your call.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ali. Bye.
That's interesting. I mean, media seems to play a really big part, right? But I think, what Ali's main point was as a community. It doesn't seem to be something which is important to Asians generally, right?
Yeah, and, I think so again, my father's been amazingly supportive in terms of anything I've done, but I'd say even he was sort of hesitant. Sorry, Dad, if you're listening, but was hesitant in terms of going from I had a private sector job and it was all kind of there, and then actually going into the public sector and that there's a job security issue, there's the money issue, and the hours aren't any better.
No.
So what from his perspective, I understand. He's like, well, what are you gaining from this? And I think that's probably a conversation that a lot of people, as Ali said, have experienced. But there is certainly, I think, a role to play for organisations like us, I think, to educate parents, and to say that actually, it's a viable career move. There are kind of, there is a career, you can actually grow, and there is a career in it. There are transferable skills. It's not something you necessarily just stay in. You can move out of it and do other things, and it looks interesting. Anyone who works in politics is actually really, really interesting, and
despite what Ali seems to say about that.
Despite that, actually, these people have varied interests, and just like every other person. And this is why I keep saying, I would encourage everyone to write to your politician, write to your MP, get in touch with your councillors. I would say the more time you spend in the arena with people, like, you realise that actually it's not something that is, so far away.
And they're normal people in politics.
They are just normal people.
Now we've got another text message from an anonymous person who says the role of religion also plays a really big part in politics, and also the leaders, community leaders, and saying that, especially with Hindu community leaders, there's a lack of encouragement.
I'd go further than that. I would say instead of a lack of encouragement, you'll notice, I mean, I've seen this an awful lot for a couple of years now. Whenever there's some way to get involved within politics for the community leaders jump at the opportunity, and they'll be bustling through, nudging everyone out of the way to get into the MP, get into the House of Commons, to get a picture with an MP.
Downing Street and...
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make them effective political actors, and what's more, it stops anyone else getting in there and, getting an opportunity to actually do something. So I'm quite disillusioned with how our community seems to interact with politics.
It's a shame, though, because when it comes to, events, everyone's there, everyone's talking to the MPs, and, they will have the photo opportunities. But then after that event, what happens next? What's the follow-on? What's going on behind the scenes? And unfortunately, sometimes there's not an awful lot.
Yeah, no, it's completely right. I think the events are, the less key parts of the whole political process, but often it seems to be the other way around. They seem to be the major events, and don't worry about the policy work or getting your opinion across. That's whatever, you got your picture.
I know. I mean, it's such a shame. What do you think, Mayuri? Do you think, especially with the Hindu community leaders,
we hold these events, so some of these events,
no, but they're great.
So I wouldn't say that from my perspective, the reason we have we do hold events like this is because I think actually, as we've already discussed, there are so few people interested in the first place. Actually, just having like-minded people, and particularly from my perspective, is getting like-minded British Indians that maybe interested but don't know much about politics, to just be introduced to it and to meet some key people is really important. But you're absolutely right, the follow-up is key. And I would encourage, if you get invites to these things, bring along young people, bring along your sons and your daughters or your nephews and nieces. I think it's really, really important that you introduce people at a young age, because if you say go to an event in Portcullis House and you happen to see like, for example, there was an event the other day, charity called Seva Day, for example, and they were holding awards, and the Prime Minister walked in.
Oh, fantastic!
And these teachers who probably would never have met the Prime Minister ever, were awarded they were awarded by the Prime Minister. So it was just like, oh wow, this is amazing. So you never know what, and that could, I'm sure that sort of experience is something that you can hold for life.
Yeah.
So I would encourage, community leaders, parents, if you happen to know someone who knows someone that goes to these events, and if they say come along, then make sure that you also bring people that either are not interested at all or are kind of don't know enough. And just to encourage and widen that pool of people.
Yeah, the events, they're a great way for networking. They're a great opportunity for someone to get, a snippet of, what's going on in the political process. But I think the leaders do have responsibility that, it's great for them to go to these events and meet all these people, but they should, be looking after the interests of their community in the political arena.
It's really interesting, because I think what you say is completely true. There's this networking element. I know people often look at it as being something that only bankers or high city flyers, do, right? But it's really interesting. I've been to a few of these events, right? I didn't know what they were about, was curious, went along, but I found that because I was slightly interested in the subject, almost everyone else there was similarly interested in it, and the concerns I had about politics as a young person were actually shared. You're talking to a lot of other like-minded people out there. It's not just you who thinks, oh, it's a system which I'm not going to get into, or all the politicians are the same, all the parties are the same. These views they're really good to be discussed in these places. That's what these places are for, and I really enjoyed it because of that.
Yeah, I mean, you've got you've got actually lots of student community groups. I used to work with the National Hindi Students Forum, for example, which I think are fantastic in terms of the fact that they not only do they have kind of reach across universities, but actually I think they're trying to do a campaign in terms of getting more people involved and to register and whatever. And these groups play, I think, a big part in reaching out to those potential 3.5 million voters, basically, that I think otherwise we wouldn't be reaching.
No, definitely, and especially with the National Hindi Students Forum, you see them involved in lots of campaigns in India and Pakistan, and it makes you think, wow, if I get involved with the student union, I can make a difference, not only to Hindis in the UK, but also in other countries too. And I think that's really important. There needs to be more of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people that are listening are involved with their student unions, actually, because that's probably your first, apart from, I know Ali mentioned student council at school, and then you go to university, and actually your student union's a really, really good place to kind of get a taste of what politics... Well, it's all about saying, I want to have voice my opinion and influence the decision-making process about something that's important to me. And, that could be... lowering the price of a pint to a pound, whatever it is, when you're at university, and basically that translates hopefully into the way you think about the world once you graduate.
Yeah, we've got a text message in from Zainab. It's going back to our earlier point that people need to explain to young people how politics in England works, because a lot of people or parents don't know. And it's true, I think sometimes the youth don't actually know what goes on, or they're not really involved in the whole process.
There's something I wanted to ask you, Mayuri, what you think about this, because communication seems to be a key here, right? If you can communicate to youngsters and youngsters can communicate back, things would improve a lot more, right? What do you think about, we've got things like the internet now. What do you think about having things like online polls? Wouldn't a lot more youngsters get engaged if they had a way to get engaged through, say, I don't know, Facebook?
Yeah, I mean, Facebook's doing really well for political campaigning.
Yeah. I mean, you saw in Barack Obama's campaign that, that was a key element, a key driving force engaging youngsters.
And Modis as well in India, Narendra Modi, Twitter and Facebook.
BB Messenger and WhatsApp as well. I mean, it's the future, isn't it? So we are going to need to, and even with the the campaign strategists that both the Conservatives and Labour have got, David Axelrod and Clinton Crosby. I mean, these guys are looking at social media and how do we best, use it, because I'd say more people now use social media. I think, I don't know if I saw it right, twice as many people are registered on youth are registered on Facebook as they are to vote. So, again,
that's very believable.
Wow, yeah.
which is very believable. So exactly. So actually, it's the best way to communicate. And how many times do you check your Facebook updates a day?
A lot.
Compared to, say, BBC News or anything else.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Do you think in the future we'd even need politicians if we were to just make everything online and just have online polls, right?
An online revolution?
Yeah, it'd be
like in Syria?
Well, maybe slightly different, but...
No, I mean, I think that we need this formal system of government that we've kind of developed over nearly 1,000 years now has I think served us well. We are kind of the cornerstone, like the mother of all parliaments, the UK Parliament, for civilised democracy in the world. And I think that is something that we should treasure and respect. And actually, I'm all for. Yes, I think we probably need to look at some of the mechanisms of engagement. Absolutely, to make sure that actually we're reaching out to. If it's democracy, then we need to make sure that actually it's the people that have the say and are actually being engaged with properly. And social media is going to, I think, for the next few generations to come, we're going to need to know. I think the strategists and sort of the policymakers are going to have to think about this issue.
It's a huge market, that needs to be tapped into, and you can always keep up to date with what's going on in politics through Twitter and Facebook anyway. But I guess getting out there a bit more and putting it in maybe like a friendly term, so the youth will be able to,
I think relate to it. But then there's the argument that actually social media is like it. What? How do you use it to keep up to date with politics?
What I do with Twitter.
To
be honest, yes. Twitter definitely.
Okay, but I'd say the majority of people use it to keep up to date with what Rihanna's doing, and I think it's gossip, friends. It's very much a kind of what happens in the social sphere, and I think we need to fix what's happening in outside social media in terms of engagement with people before we can start. I think then it will translate into social media.
Oh, okay. You think you'd naturally filter in if politics has become a bit more of a social,
or if it becomes more of an everyday part of your life in terms of thinking about politics and the decision making process, which it is an everyday part of my life. But is it an everyday part? It's definitely.
I think we're a select few in here.
The majority of people. It's not something you wake up and think, oh, I wonder what laws in passing in Parliament today. Or, what debate is there? Or what private members' bill is being put forward. I mean, this is probably jargon to a lot of people out there. Don't know what I'm talking about. And I mean, it's. I think one of you made the point that we need to start actually talking. The text message. We need to start actually telling people the difference between, things like what Parliament does and what a local council does. How a constituency broken up in the UK. What are the different electoral systems? It's different for, say, for the local elections and the general elections. How how are they different?
And if people did get involved in politics, it will actually benefit them a great deal. I mean, lots of youth are really angry about tuition fees and about the system in general. Whereas if they got involved in politics, voice their opinions, they'll be able to make a difference.
I mean, for example, with UKIP now getting a lot of press. Europe seems to be something which a lot of people have an opinion on, a view on, but most people don't know who their MEP is.
No, that's very true.
It's quite telling, I think. Yeah.
And it goes back to the earlier point as well, saying that there's such a big celebrity culture that people are more, they care more about what the celebrities are doing than actually what's happening in their own country. Which is a shame as well.
You spoke about disillusionment briefly, right? And youngsters, not being happy with the system. Russell Brand's been recently getting a lot of press, and his glorious revolution. What do you think about that? Do you think it will happen?
I think it goes back to my original point. I think that the formal processes that are in place, although probably need some reform, we should be using. I don't think it's good enough to just say, let's go off and devise a whole new way of doing this, because actually I think there are existing systems that are just being underused, existing processes, and the reason why they're being underused is because there's not enough information out there.
Sure.
So I mean, it's annoying because people like Russell Brand will get loads and loads more media than, say, even the Prime Minister about certain things, and it kind of
Russell Brand for Prime Minister.
Yeah,
can you imagine?
How terrifying would that be?
Oh, I would love that.
It'd be interesting.
Oh God,
We've
yeah.
got-
Yeah, you're probably thinking now, thank God thank God youngsters don't vote,
Well, I mean, unfortunately, cynically, that argument, is one that's kind of seems to be one that people do talk about. That actually, if all of a sudden we get all these 18-year-olds voting, we may have to bring tuition fees back, or
get rid of them.
Sorry, and we may have to. What about things like the EMA allowance, which was cut, and what about all of these things? It ended up being quite expensive.
but they are important, right? I'm having to claw my way out of debt.
That's why I'm here. I think,
Okay,
of course,
great.
I think the youth vote is important. That's why I think it's important that ultimately, and I think if people who are interested should go to Bite the Ballot, because I think it's a fantastic campaign. It explains it really, really well. If you
Is there a website for that you can share with our listeners?
yeah, it's bitetheballot.co.uk.
Excellent.
And if you go to that, you can watch some of the videos. And essentially, they say, well, it's hard enough to make policies for people that are registered to vote, and who all have individual opinions. But why should they listen to people that aren't?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, unfortunately, it's coming to the end of the show. Thank you very much, Mayuri, for being on. We've had a great discussion. And I think it's, we really raise the importance of why youth should be involved in politics. And actually, it's in everyone's interest that the youth are involved in politics. So if you haven't
Definitely.
registered, please do register.
Yeah,
Get
you can
involved.
Register to vote at aboutmyvote.co.uk. You have till May the 6th for the local elections on May the 22nd.
Yeah,
Okay.
write letters to your MPs, ask
Right.
for tours.
Don't care who you vote for, vote.
Exactly, because I think it's really important living in a democracy. We use our right to vote.
And get
carefully.
involved. It doesn't have to, as you said earlier, you don't have to get involved by necessarily come to Parliament or being part of the local assembly. You can be a school governor. You can get involved with community projects. There's lots of stuff you can do.
And there's things
That's
within
true.
people's schools as well that can help them get
Absolutely.
involved in politics.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much
Thanks a
for
lot,
joining us
Prerna.
on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
It's been great having you. You can keep up to date on A Reasonable Conversation and who we've got lined up on our Facebook page. It's www.facebook.com/A Reasonable Conversation. Join me, same time, same place next week.